Mercy is not getting what you deserve. Grace, that's getting what you never could have earned. Most people never accept it because grace demands everything.
Most of my life, I couldn't tell the difference. I'd stand there, filthy, half broken, completely broke, just hoping for mercy. Never once imagining someone might hand me grace. Because grace is risky. It's risky to give it, and it's risky to accept it. And the hardest truth is that grace only works if you accept it. Most of us, we just can't. If you've ever pushed away help because you didn't think you deserved it, or because it didn't come just the way you wanted it to, drop a comment that says, I get it. And don't forget to follow because we're only halfway through this story. In the last few episodes, I told you about wandering the streets of Spokane, wearing the only pair of flip-flops that I had, carrying everything I owned in a gym bag, and begging for stale donuts. Then I told you about running through the night in Montana and barely catching my bus at 2 a.m., which was my last shot to get out. And I thought that getting out meant freedom. But that pit, it just doesn't stay put. Because sometimes you're in the pit, and sometimes the pit is in you. And it follows you. It clings to you under your fingernails and follows you even across state lines. So yeah, there I was out of Spokane in Colorado, out of the immediate crisis. But that grace, that's a different story. Because grace isn't just about getting out of somewhere. It's about what happens next. When people start offering you what you don't deserve, and you have to decide whether or not you're actually going to take it. So I saw several examples of grace, accepted and rejected firsthand. One of the most vivid examples happened just a few weeks after I arrived in Colorado. You see, there was this couple back in Portland that Danielle had lived with. Well, let me explain. She more than lived with them. This couple took Danielle in after she had been a homeless drug addict and radically given her life to Christ, and she had no place to go. So this couple took her in, and eventually she came to call them mom and dad. And that's kind of how I knew them when I married her. They were like the second set of parents. Great people, good people, and they loved Danielle to death. They would have done almost anything for her. So here they were in Portland. We had been in Spokane, and no one had heard from Danielle in weeks, including myself. And so one day I get a phone call from this couple, and they said, Andrew, we feel called that we're going to go look for her, and we're going to try to figure out if we can help her. And I said, good luck. I said, I wish I could help you, but I'm 1,000 miles away. And they said, well, we don't know anything about where she is, but we're hoping that you could give us a few clues so that we can drive up there and actually see if we can find her. So I racked my brain a little bit, and I thought of a few names of people that they might be able to call, gave a few phone numbers, and they said, all right, that's where we'll start. So they drove up there. It was like a 5-hour drive from Portland to Spokane. And they kept me updated on their progress, and they got to Spokane on like a Saturday afternoon. They called me. And throughout that weekend, they kept updating me as far as like, hey, we checked this place, we couldn't find her. Hey, we checked this place, we couldn't find her. Hey, we checked this place, we couldn't find her. And finally, they called me one last time and said, Andrew, is there anyone else that you can think of that might know where she is? So again, racked my brain. I went through my Facebook contacts and I found one more person that I thought maybe they could contact. And I said, you're not probably going to want to get in touch with this person because they are a shady character. And I hesitated giving them the name because I knew what type of person this guy was. But they said, we don't care, Andrew. We're trusting God and we're believing that he can do a miracle. And I said, all right, well, call this guy and maybe he'll know. Long story short, they tracked her down in a drug house, and they went straight into the musty, carpeted drug house with cigarette smoke hanging in the air, glass pipes still on the table, looking for her. And they found her, and they offered her everything. A safe home, rehab, a new start. She said, let me think about it. And they said, all right, well, tomorrow morning we're going to be at this place, or we'll buy you breakfast, we'll buy you a cup of coffee, and you let us know then. So they told me this, and I was like, well, if she shows up, that's great. I don't think she will, but she might. I woke up the next morning just nervous in the pit of my stomach because I still want her to get her life straight. I still want her to turn things around. And so I'm still praying for her, and waited all morning for that phone call from them. And they finally called me later in the day and they said, Andrew, we found her. We met with her. We bought her breakfast. We bought her a few clean clothes. And we said, whatever it is that you need, you can come with us. We'll get you into rehab. You can stay with us, all of that. And in the long run, in the end, she said no. So she rejected their grace. I rejected grace many times in my life, from my family, friends, lots of people. And I'm sure that if I've rejected grace, many of you have also rejected that grace, if you've lived any kind of a life like I have before. And I know why Danielle turned them down, because I'd done the same thing. My family offered me help over and over and over again. My dad and my brother tried to get me to leave Spokane long before I actually did, and I refused because I wasn't ready. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to admit how broken I was and that the situation was completely out of my control. And even when I finally got on that bus and made it to Colorado, I still wasn't free. I was still sneaking weed, grabbing beers on the side, trying to self-soothe in any way I could, pacing in the backyard under the moonlight, just praying to God that I could make it through one more day, trying to fight off those nightmares that never seemed to end. That pit, it still clung to me. I couldn't wash it off. I was still running from a God who was standing there, hand outstretched. But God's grace doesn't give up because you're too slow to accept it. Sometimes it shows up again through unexpected people in unexpected places. So, why do we reject grace? Well, we think we're too far gone, that we're too bad to actually accept it. Number two, we actually really don't want change because we're still in that mud, like that prodigal son that I've talked about multiple times. Or we want help, but we only want help on our terms. And that's maybe the most dangerous type. I've talked a little bit about my time in Celebrate Recovery down there. Again, that's where I actually made this shirt and why I keep it around. But if you know anything about Celebrate Recovery, coffee is a really big deal. And usually it's terrible coffee. I don't know what it is about addicts and Narcotics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery, all those things, that they just can't seem to make a good cup of coffee. But anyway, one night I was at Celebrate Recovery and I met a man who was about my age and whose life had gotten even more out of control than mine. His wife was much more toxic. His relationship with his kids was basically non-existent, but he had found some hope. And I remember having a conversation with him. He said, Andrew, I want you to tell me your story. And I said, I don't think I can do that. And he said, Andrew, you need to tell me. And I said, it takes way too long. There's way too much to it. He said, I don't care how long it takes. You're going to tell me one of these days. So I gave him my phone number and he texted me a few times. I always came up with an excuse not to go hang out with him. Anyway, one day he just up and calls me and said, Andrew, I am on my way to your brother's house to pick you up and you're going to tell me your story. And I didn't have any excuses that day. And he picked me up and he drove me and we grabbed a cup of coffee and then we drove out to this Christian retreat center and found a nice quiet spot. And we just sat there and drank coffee for probably 2 hours. And I went through all the nitty gritty, gory details of everything that had happened that had led me to the point where I had been a homeless drug addict. I told him about the terrible treatment for my ex-wife. I told him about losing my kids. I told him about all the hospital visits and all of the things and all of the pain that I had felt. I just emotionally vomited all over him. The stuff that came out of me was caked in shame that I had never even admitted to myself. And what did he do? Did he get up and walk away? No. He sat there, mostly silent, occasionally asking a clarifying question or prodding me for more information. And there were a few people that knew a lot of my story, but no one knew everything. But this was the first time that I sat down and I told one person everything. They didn't flinch. They didn't judge. They didn't bolt. They showed me grace, and that's what grace is. In the book of Ephesians chapter 2, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast." Right? Grace is nothing that you did, it's nothing that you earned, and it's nothing that you deserve. And that is grace, and it is a gift, but it is a gift that you only receive if you swallow your pride and accept it. Psalm 40 still echoes in my bones. He drew me up from the pit of destruction, out of the miry bog, and he set my feet upon a rock. But he can't pull you up if you're still hugging the mud. So this episode, I've talked quite a bit about grace, and I guess that's the theme. I've talked about the consequences of not accepting it, and I've talked about the rewards and the blessing that come with accepting it. But grace isn't always easy. There's 3 things you need to understand about grace that are not easy. Number 1 is that grace is getting what you don't deserve, even while you're still covered in filth and muck. Number 2, grace is offered, but you have to accept it. And number 3, it won't instantly fix everything, but it does start the process. Don't turn it down just because it comes from someone you didn't expect, in a way that you didn't expect, and at a time when you weren't ready. Or because deep down, you're too scared to change. Next week, I'll show you how accepting grace didn't just magically heal me overnight, but it cracked the door open. That's when God started building something new in me from the rubble that was my life. Drop a comment below that says "still here" if you're currently stuck in your own pit and you want help out. I read and respond to every comment on my page. And share this with a man who keeps turning away grace, and follow the channel, because the next part, that's where the reconstruction actually begins.
So if you like this content, please give it a rating, a review, and share it with your friends. Also, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about me and what I'm all about and what I can maybe do for you, check out my website at thedangerousgentleman.org. That's thedangerousgentleman.org. Thank you for listening.